Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jake Stakowitz, and I am excited to be here today giving this webinar with Golden Software. Today, I'm going to be walking through some introductory scripter concepts and demonstrating basic debugging techniques. Topics that we're going to cover today are sample scripts, where to find them and how to generate them from Golden Software's resources. I'm going to share some tips on how to begin writing your own scripts, following the scripter command and syntax structure. And I'll provide a beginner's guide on how to debug your scripts if they fail. There'll be a few stopping points during the webinar where I take a couple minutes to answer any questions. You can send your questions to the webinar host via the Q&A located on the Zoom toolbar at any time. And type in your question, and it'll be sent to the webinar host, who will either answer it or forward it to me. Please use the Q&A function rather than the chat, and this will allow the host to ensure we see all questions in a timely manner. Feel free to send in all your questions, and if we don't have time to answer them during the webinar, we will answer them via email once the webinar is complete. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, and later this week we will post the recording along with the data used in the webinar, and we'll send each of you a link when that's posted so you can test these examples out for yourself. But now let's get started. If you're a brand new Scripter user and attending this webinar for an introductory lesson, you may not be aware that Scripter is installed automatically with any Surfer, Grapher, or Voxler installation. To open Scripter, if you don't have a desktop icon already saved, you can search your operating system's programs for Scripter, and it is a blue square icon, which when you click, will open up a blank script window. And this blue square is what the icon looks like. If I had commands and syntax memorized, I could then immediately start typing into this window between the submain and end sub lines to generate whatever automated workflow my heart desired. I personally do not have too many commands memorized though, and that is where our several resources for sample scripts come in so handy. We have sample scripts saved in a samples folder that is installed with your program, samples in the Surfer help, and samples on the Golden Software support site in knowledge base articles. First, I'm going to show you how to navigate to the sample folder where these scripts and many other sample map types are stored. You can access the sample folder directly from Scripter or any other program that you are running by clicking File, Open, and then navigating to your C drive. Once in your C drive, you can select Program Files, Golden Software, and then the product and version that you are working in. For us today, that's Surfer Beta. Once there, you can click the samples folder, and now we're here in the samples folder. If we had opened this in Surfer, we would see example SRF files of our map types, some example grids, data sheets, and then ultimately what we are looking for, this folder called scripts. Since we clicked File Open through Scripter, we only see this scripts folder because those are the only file types Scripter can open. And here in the scripts folder, we have many scripts that you can open in full directly into this window behind us. These files cover many common workflows that you may want to automate in your use of Surfer. And a script is generally saved as a .bas file type. So that is primarily what we're going to see in here. Some of these scripts are set to run without any extra input by you, and some require the input of your data files that you want the script to apply its commands to. Whether the sample you choose can run without any extra work by you or not, all of these sample scripts in this folder are going to contain instructions or descriptions for each line that explain what the line does and what information you may need to fill in. And since we have the samples folder open, I'm going to go ahead and provide an example of a script that is ready to go without any additional script writing on our part. And that script that I'm going to use is our grid data comparison.bas file. When I click open, the script gets populated in the window behind me. And once I have this open, we can see what I was talking about. We have a description of what the script is going to do at the top, step-by-step instructions of what will happen when we click run, And at each line, we have an explanation of what the command is doing. And any text that is in green in your script, the program will not read it when you click run. So what this grid data comparison script is going to do when I click run is it's going to prompt me to open a data file, prompt me to enter which columns match to my XYZ data, and then it's going to create 8 contours demonstrating the differences between popular gridding methods on that same set of data. So to run it, I can either click this green play button, or I can click script run. I'll be prompted to open my data file. And for me, that is this metro2.csv file. This contains elevation data of the Denver metro area. Once I click open, I'll be prompted to enter my X column number, which for me is 2. Then my Y, which for me is 1. And then my Z, which is 3. And when I click OK on that last data input, that script is going to run behind me in a new Surfer window. You can see we now have 8 contours that represent the 8 most popular grading methods in Surfer. That was also clearly much more efficient and quicker than if I would have clicked new map contour and selected a grid file for each individual map. And so that covers a script where we didn't have to do any additional script writing. For our next example, I'm going to use a sample script that is in a different location than the C drive. We have 2 other places that you can access sample scripts, and one of those is through our Golden Software Support website. Let me just resize that for you guys. On our support website, we have automation knowledge base articles dedicated to Surfer, Grapher, Voxler, and our now retired product Map Viewer. A quick way to access these articles would be to open our website and simply type automation into the search bar here. That will bring up in the top 4 results those 4 products that I just mentioned. And since we're using Surfer, if I click on the Surfer automation article, I'll be taken to a library that contains every knowledge base article we've ever written that includes a sample script or a workflow that you can automate. And as you can see, we have more than 4 pages of this, so we have a lot of samples you can go through to see if we have what you're trying to do. These knowledge base articles will be more descriptive of what the workflow that you're trying to accomplish in Surfer, compared to those scripts in the sample folder, which just have the file name. So it requires some background Surfer knowledge to know what the feature that relates to the file name is going to do. Of course, once you open up those samples, though, there will be the descriptions in green. And the article that we're going to use today is this open an existing SRF file, replace the grid file for the contour map, and save to a new name in Surfer Scripter. When I open it up, this contains the sample script in this gray box here. And this script is going to, like it says, replace the grid file for an existing contour map and save it as a totally new file. This is a very helpful automation workflow if you work in a field where you are updating map templates with new data. This script allows you to use contour settings that you already like the look of and just load in some new grid data. And for this example, I want to update the grid file at a well site with some new grid data. And that would be this contour of a well site here. I like the color scheme that we're using. I like this color scale. And I want to keep these well locations that are in a post layer. So if we go back to the KB article, like I said, we have that sample script in gray here. And then we also have step-by-step instructions for how to run the script listed here. And at the bottom, we have the .bas file that we can download so that we could click File, Open, and just directly populate this into our script window. Alternatively, we can also copy and paste this whole script directly from the website. To then run this in Scripter, I would have to open a new script window. To do so, I can just click File, New. Now I have a new blank script, and I'm just pasting in that script that I just copied from the website. This is an example of a script that's going to require us to fill in lines that correspond to our own data files. The lines we have to fill in can be found here underneath the user-defined variables section. You can see they're blocked off by the equal signs. And what we need to fill in is our file path, which refers to the folder all our data files are housed in, the project file name, which is our original SRF file that we want to change, and the grid file name and extension, which refer to the new grid file we want to update our original SRF file with. After that, we also have mapnum and layernum objects, which refer to the map and layer objects here in our original SRF file. So for file path, we need to change this from Leslie's desktop to the file or folder that is containing all of our files. If you're ever unsure of your file path, Windows users can right-click a folder, click Properties, and a pop-up window containing your file path that you can easily copy and paste will open. I did that at an earlier point. So I have my file path in a clipboard, and I'm just going to paste it in now. When pasting in your file path, always, or any value in general in Scripter, always make sure that you didn't add any extra characters or spaces in between the quotations. This will cause your script to run with an error, and you'll save yourself the headache of having to rerun it and fix it later. For project file name, we would add the name of the original SRF file that we want to update with new grid data. For our purposes, that SRF file is called Wells1. It is this one right here. For grid file name and extension, I would add the name of my grid file that I want to replace the current contours in Wells1 with, and then what file extension corresponds to that grid file. My grid file is called Wells2, and it is a .grd file extension, so I can just leave that as it is. Finally, these mapnum and layernum sections refer to the map object and layer objects in your map here. To determine what number you need to fill in, I would always recommend opening up your original SRF file to double check that you have it right. And if we read the information that the sample provides, it says that 1 always refers to the bottom object in the contents window. The bottom map object it means. And if we look in our contents window here, we only have the 1 map object, so we can also inference that this is the bottommost map object. Accordingly, we need to change this to 1. But if there was another map, then the one down here would be 1, and this one would become 2. For the layernum section, we are now referring to the layers within this map object. And we can see we have a contour and post layer. Our contour layer is the bottommost layer. And so once again, our layernum is going to equal 1. But if these contours and post layers were switched, then the contours layer would be 2. But it's the bottom one, so we can leave it as 1. And now that I have all my user-defined variables filled, I can click the green play button here, and we're going to update that exact contour map with a new grid file. Here you can see I just flipped the grid data for this example. And if I would copy this into that original file, we'd be able to see that this is the exact same color scheme. We have the same well locations. I just updated it with a new grid file. And now that I have those user-defined variables set in my script, I could save that script. And at any point in the future, I could easily open it up. And all I would have to do is update this grid file line right here with any new grid file that I wanted to update my original template with. So that's going to cover two of the areas where we can find sample scripts, as well as two different types of sample scripts being ready to run and requiring us to define our variables. Next, we're going to move to the last place where we can find sample scripts, which is the Surfer and Scripter help websites. The help websites contain explanations of every command you can execute with Scripter and include examples of how to use that command. And since the next section of this webinar covers what commands and syntax use when writing our scripts, this is where I'm going to take a second to pause and answer any questions that have come up so far before we dive into that help site. All right, one question I'm seeing is the initialization of Surfer, being the first 5 lines of the code here, always necessary in any scripter code? Yes, it is necessary to define Surfer as the application, or if you're using a different program like Grapher, for example, so that then you can execute the following commands. I'm actually going to go over this in the next section of the webinar. All right, another question is, it looks like the update to our grid file here is just a mirror image of the original. Is that correct? Yes, it is correct. Just for the purpose of this example, I just took our original grid and mirrored it so that we could see it. You can do this with grid math in Surfer. All right, and it looks like we don't have any other questions right now, so thank you for those. I'm now going to go through our help website and highlight resources that you can reference to ensure you utilize the proper commands and syntax that Scripter requires once you begin writing your own scripts. There are a few different ways we can access the Surfer and Scripter help website. We can access them directly from Surfer by clicking this blue question mark here, which will open the Surfer help window. We can access it directly from Scripter by clicking Help, Surfer Automation Help, and that will open up this Scripter help window. Or we can access it directly from a web browser by searching surferhelp.goldensoftware.com. I personally prefer using the help website through a web browser like this. I like it better because I find it easier to read in a browser-sized window. And if I need to reference multiple articles at a time, I can have multiple tabs open. It's definitely a matter of personal opinion, wherever you like to open your help website through though. And once on the Surfer help site, if we scroll down, in the bottom left, we can see we have an entirely dedicated automation section. And if we expand the drop-down menu for this section, we have articles explaining things such as the various windows in Scripter, some guides to start writing your scripts, an introduction, and ultimately what we're going to be using today, we have lists of every single object you can reference within Surfer using Scripter, and lists that show what methods and properties you can use to customize those objects. So if I first click on the list of objects header, I'm going to open up this article that gives us an explanation of what a Surfer object is and a summary of the major ones that we should know. Off to the left, we can also see we get the expanded list of each object command that we can reference in a script. And this introduction article here is great for providing context to beginners on what the purpose of the main objects you're going to use in a script are. And since this is a 101 webinar, I'm going to give a quick summary of that information now. So first off, we have the application object. This is what we just had a question about. This represents Surfer or whatever other program that you're trying to run with Scripter. You always have to call the application first. Next, we have objects in the documents collection. These contain commands that open new plots and worksheets in the application that you just defined with the application object. We then have objects in the Windows collection, which allow you to open different windows within the Golden software program you're using. For Surfer, these would be your plot window, your worksheet window, and your grid editor. After that, we have plot document objects, and these are going to refer to the SRF files that will be opened and or altered by your script. And worksheet document objects then refer to the worksheet that you may be operating in for your script. And plot window, worksheet window, and grid window objects refer to those specific windows you may have designated earlier in the window collection. After that, we have objects that are in the shapes collection. A shape object is any graphic or map object that would be contained in your SRF file. You can think of these as anything that you would find in your contents window in Surfer. And then we have selection objects, and these are the properties or methods associated with moving and selecting your shapes. These are commands that would do things such as resize and rotate your shape objects. Then finally, we have map frame objects, and these contain all the map properties that might be associated with our shapes. These would be things such as your coordinate system and axes properties. And now that we have a general idea of the objects we can reference in a Surfer script, we need to get familiar with what order those objects are meant to be listed in a script. And for our visual learners, we have a great object hierarchy model that you can look at. So this model starts up here in the top left. It starts with the application object that is opening whatever program we plan to reference. And then it moves to the right and down, where it visually shows what order you should list commands in a script to reference the major objects that we just learned about. So to walk through this quickly, we would start by calling our application. In this example, it would be Surfer. Then we would go to referencing our documents, which could be an existing SRF file and grid file. And once our documents are referenced, we would use these plot document and worksheet document objects to call them. We then could go move to using our shape and selection objects to create and select maps that would be in our content window. And everything after that refers to the map frame objects and the various layers and properties that are over here that would be using to customize our shapes. This object hierarchy is very helpful to reference if you're ever unsure what order commands in your script should be written in. And coming up next, I'm going to use the object list to write a script. And once that is finished, I'm going to reopen this object hierarchy to show how that script maps to this model. And so now that we have this basic overview of the major Surfer objects, an idea of what order they should be referenced in, let's try writing our own script from scratch. I'm going to be trying to create a script that creates a contour map, fills those contours, and then sets a gradient for the fill of those contours. If I had no idea where to start for writing this script, I could open up this article here titled Object List Surfer Automation. This list contains a list of every automation object that can be used in a Surfer script. It also includes the current way to write that object, and if it was ever different in a former version of Surfer or Scripter, that is also listed here. And so I know that I want to create a contour map, but maybe I don't know exactly what command to use. By scrolling through this list that is in alphabetical order, I would eventually get to the contour layer object, which I can inference creates a contour map. This help website is set up so that if we click any of the objects in this list, in this case, our contour layer object, we are taken to a page that lists what commands create the contour map, as well as any associated properties and methods for customizing our contour map. If we wanted to, we could start writing our script with just this reference information, but by clicking any of these object pages, we also get example scripts at the bottom of the page. And so these samples are pre-written examples that show you how to utilize the object that the article is referring to. And this script here is going to go ahead and create a contour map from a sample file preloaded onto your machines in that C drive sample folders. And instead of going ahead and writing this whole sample out, we can once again just directly copy and paste this into a new script window. So once again, we click File, New to create a new script window. And we can paste this in instead of going through the process of writing all of these commands. And this will now run without any additional data input by us. But I would assume most of us do not want to create a contour map from the demo data that Golden Software ships with your installations. And so if you want to add your own data, you would change line 30 here, and you would just have to change the file path in between these quotation marks. So if I wanted to do, for example, that Wells 1 or the Wells 2 grid that we used in a previous example, I could input that there. Like I said, this is ready to run, so we can click the green play button. And we have just a plain unfilled contour map from that demo grid that we can see here. An unfilled contour map is a bit boring though. So let's go ahead and spice this up by adding commands to our script that are going to fill the contour map with one of the color maps that Surfer ships with. Another great aspect of the Surfer help site is that I can click on any of these listed properties and go to a new article that will tell me how to write those properties in my script. And since I know that I want to fill our contours, let's take a look at the fill contours property article. Here on this page, we get a description of what fill contours is going to do, how to utilize it, and the proper syntax to use when including it in our script. We also are going to get these examples here at the bottom. And so I know I need to write the command contour layer.fill contours and then use a Boolean statement to say if I want to fill my contours or not. And we could write that in, or for time's sake, I can paste it into the bottom of my currently existing script. The reason that we're adding this command to the bottom is due to that object hierarchy. We have to first have a contour map, which is created by the commands here. And then once we have a contour map, we can fill those contours. But we couldn't fill the contours before the map existed. If I clicked run again now, I would fill our contours, but it would be a default black and white fill. So before we click run again, let's go back to the contour layer object page and look for a command that sets a fill color. We can see a couple of fill color properties here, but we specifically are looking to set the color map of our filled contours, and that's going to be the fill foreground color map property. Once on this page, we have a description of what the command does. We can see the syntax for how to write the command into our script, and we get a sample script of how the command is used. This property references .clr files, as we can see here. .clr files are color files that are saved in the program file for each of the color maps that we offer as a fill color when you're normally accessing the properties manager of a contour map. I personally am happy to use the rainbow fill, so I'm going to copy and paste this directly into our script. But if I wanted to use a color map other than rainbow, I would go to the samples folder, see what CLR files are available, and when I add this into my script window, I would change this bit in between the quotations to match whatever CLR file I wanted to use. So let's add this to our existing script. And once again, we're adding this to the bottom due to the object hierarchy. We have to create our shape. We have to add our contour map. Then we have our map frame. Then we can fill our contours. And once we have filled contours, we can set the color map for those filled contours. And this script is now ready to run, so I can click the green play button to do so. And as you can see behind me, we have a new rainbow filled contour map. As compared to our unfilled contour map. And I did mention that I was going to go back over the object hierarchy model and show how our script maps onto that. So I'm going to resize this window so we can do that now. So we have the beginning where we declare our application as surfer. We then have our documents. We add our document and our plot document. That's happening here. After that, we declare our shapes. So we go down to the shape section. Then we go to our map frame, set map frame. Then once from our map frame, we add a contour layer. And from our contour layer, our color, our fill, and the color we chose, that refers to the levels. So we go application, documents, plot document, shape, map frame, contour layer, levels. And so by referencing the Surfer Helps object list and the object hierarchy, you can follow this exact process we just did for any map type you are hoping to create or workflow you want to automate. You simply just need to find the object that corresponds to what you want to do, and then continue drilling down through the help to customize that object with their corresponding methods and properties commands. And that's going to cover the commands and syntax portion of the webinar. Next, we're going to do an introduction to debugging the scripts that we've created. But first, do we have any more questions? All right, one question I'm seeing is, do we have support for Stratter? Currently, Scripter does not work with Stratter, but if you are asking if we provide customer support for Stratter, we do. You can call our phone line or reach out to us at support@goldensoftware.com. And another question I'm seeing here is, are we going to cover automated saving of files? I do not have an example of that in this webinar. I can follow up with you after the webinar, and I can provide an example of that though. And another question I'm seeing is, if we wanted to reference a project-specific .lvl file, would that be referenced after setting the color map? And not quite. The process for loading an LVL file is a little different from loading a CLR file. That's going to be done instead of defining a color map. So it's going to be a totally different command. And we can follow up with you and let you know what command that is after the webinar. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions right now, so thank you for those, everybody. And let's get to the final portion of this webinar, which is going to be debugging. So after you found the right commands and set what you believe to be the proper syntax, you may find that your script isn't doing what you want or is issuing a warning message. Debugging is the process of removing these errors so that the script runs as expected. Debugging can be difficult, but there are many commands available that help with the debugging process. And before running any script, I would recommend you verify that the view status bar option is checked. If it is not checked, you're not going to get an error message when your script fails, and the debugging process will be more difficult than it needs to be for you. Now, in order to show an example of a script with an error, I'm going to delete the equals true at the end of our contour layer .fill contours command. If I ran the script now by clicking script run, the script is going to run up to that command. And we'll see that happen as we made a contours layer, but it did not get filled. And we get an error message. Let me run that again so we see that error message. We get an error message that says, no such property or method. We're getting this error because the fill contours command requires a valid Boolean statement at the end. That means it has to say equals true or equals false for Scripter to recognize it as a valid command. But let's pretend that I had just written this whole script and I did not know that that was why this error was coming up. We could also step through this script line by line so that we could identify exactly what line the error was coming from. To step through the script line by line, on the top toolbar, you can click Debug, Step Into. You can also type F8 on your keypad. I'm going to do that moving forward, so I don't have to click Debug, Step Into each time. But now each time I click F8, you can see, based on the highlight, what line of the script we are running. And we can see behind us if it runs successfully or not. So let's keep going until we get to this command. And now we've confirmed line 39 is definitely where this error is occurring. Since this is a pretty straightforward error, what I would mostly recommend at this point would be that you open up the Surf help site, you search this contour layer fill contours command, and by looking there, you would see you need to have the valid Boolean statement. You need to have equals true or equals false at the end. But perhaps there were multiple errors in our script, and we needed to denote that the first error starts here and then keep going through it to find where the rest of them are occurring. We could add something called a toggle break. To add a toggle break, you would click Debug, Toggle Break. You also can click F9, or you can click in this gray line, which is known as the break bar. So if I click right above our line that is providing the error, I get this break bar. And now that this break bar is in here, I could press F5 and the script would stop at the break, and then we could debug step into every line afterwards to identify if we had more errors in the script. You can also utilize multiple of these toggle breaks to block off a certain section of the script and only run through those commands. This is great if we just stepped into, we identified the sections of the script that contain all our errors, and now we want to save some time from running through the entire script over and over while we debug those specific lines. We could add another break line just by clicking in, and now we could run the script just between these breaks. Another helpful debugging technique is to insert instructions into your script that monitor the progress of the script and display the values of variables at various points throughout. An instance where this would be useful would be if you have a complex script that's running through loops and you're suspicious that a part of the loop is not referencing the correct data. To check if that was the case, you could use the watch window that appears at the top of the scripter window when running the script. So if we click run, the watch window is here on the left. And when I click in it, I can now type in this area. And so once I click in it, I can type in an object name that I want to monitor. And once I add an object name, the next time we go through the script step by step, the watch window will return that object name for each step. So if I typed contour layer dot name here in the watch window, then I used the debug step into. Here at the top in the watch window, we can see we're getting a return for our contour layer name. Right now it's this error object var is nothing because a contour doesn't exist. But if I pressed F8 and continued going through my script, I would eventually get to the command that returns the grid file that is being used for our contour layer. And once again, this debugging technique is very helpful if you have a script, it's running without error, but it's not displaying the data you would expect it to, and you aren't sure at what line that is occurring. Another tool you can use for built-in debugging while writing your script is the debug.print statement. By adding debug.print and a message in quotes to a line of your script, that message will display in the immediate window here during script running. An example of when you might use this would be if you wrote a complex section of script and you're suspicious there's a certain area that might fail. At a line right after the section you are concerned about, you could write debug.print and then a message in quotations. So for example, I'm going to add our debug.print statement before our error so we can see it pop up in the immediate window. But we'd write debug print and then our message. I could write script works to line 39. And now the next time I run this, if we see this message pop up in the immediate window, that means the script works to line 39. And we can see it here. If I would have added it after line 41, we wouldn't be seeing this message, and I would know that my error is occurring before line 41. And that would mean that there's something I need to address at that point. And if using those debugging tools isn't helping you and there's still an issue in your script, Another resource you could check is the debug browse. This command opens a window that lists all commands as the program sees them. If the issue in your script is syntax and you've checked the help and the syntax appears to be the same as the help, you could check this window as our documentation team may be behind on updating our help for whatever reason. So to use this window, you would set the library to your appropriate program, Surfer. Then for data type, you would choose whatever command you're using. We're using contour layer commands. And then for our methods and properties, we could choose whatever property that we're having a problem with. We're having problems with our fill contours as Boolean. And then it's going to tell me this is the command I need to use, and the value at the end needs to be a Boolean statement, which, as we already know, we need to add equals true or equals false at the end here. And this is just a good tip. This is just another place that you can check to make sure your syntax is correct. One final debugging issue that we see quite often in tech support occurs when an end user has multiple versions of a program or multiple Golden software programs in general installed on their machine. This can lead to end users accidentally using the incorrect scripter version for a program. If you aren't sure which scripter window you've opened, you can check this by clicking Edit References. And this is going to open up a checklist, and whatever program is checked is the program that your scripter window is referencing. If this said Grapher or even a previous version of Surfer, I may be getting commands that fail no matter how correctly I've written them within the script. Things such as srf docplot will not work no matter what, and I'll continue getting that error. So if you are getting a continuous error, I would definitely recommend you check that you are referencing the correct program. And that's going to conclude the debugging section of this webinar and the webinar overall. Thank you guys for attending this Scripter Resources and Debugging 101. If you have any additional questions, we can touch on them now. Though if it's a very in-depth or script-specific question, we're most likely going to ask to move it over to an email exchange instead of doing it now. And thanks again, everybody, for attending. Do be on the lookout for some exciting things that Golden Software is rolling out at the end of the month here. We are releasing subscription licensing for the first time in our history. And we do have an update to My Account portals so that they are more user-friendly. All right, let's get to those questions now. All right, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A yet, but Katie and I will stick around a little while longer if you have anything. If not, thanks again for attending, everybody, and we'll close this down in just a couple minutes here. All right, one question I'm seeing, are there any tips for speeding up the processing? If you're referring to the processing of your scripts, I would most likely recommend you reach out to our support team at support@goldensoftware.com, and we can take a look at your script to see if maybe we can streamline any of the processes that you currently have written. Another question I'm seeing, is the object hierarchy for Grapher simpler than that for Surfer? I would not say that it is simpler, but Grapher does offer a script recorder, which we didn't touch on in this webinar since we mainly focused on Surfer. And this script recorder allows you to record, you can make your own graph based on how you want your final script to look. And then the script recorder will let you know how to build your script in that way. So that is a simpler thing that Grapher offers. The hierarchy is relatively the same amount of detail though. All right, and that seems to be all the questions for anybody who's still here. Thank you so much. We're gonna shut this down now. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.